You're now listening to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. Straightforward, no nonsense business advice. Completely unfiltered. Grow your business. Grow your life. Now, here's your host, Brian Fullerton.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to another edition of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being with us. We actually have on the line another guest interview. I'm really excited about this. We have none other than the man, Julio Tome with Lawn Care Business Success. Julio, what's going on, brother? How we doing?
I'm doing good, Brian. How's it going with you?
I'm good, brother. It's fun podcasting with the GOAT of podcasting for lawn care and landscaping. This is really exciting for me. This is like a selfish request. If you put a list together of all the people that I could interview for the podcast, I put your name right towards the top because you have been a huge asset behind the scenes to the community, to my business, to help me grow my social media and now podcasting. Your fingerprints are actually all over this podcast. A lot of people probably don't know that, but behind the scenes, you've been giving me some coaching and guidance. You and Paul Jameson. So let's slow it down before we speed up. Not everybody knows Julio Tome. You're hiding over there on the West Coast, actually in Canada, eh? And so
yeah.
Why don't you give everybody just like your quick stats, your quick vitals, so everybody knows who you are and where you're coming from.
So, I'm on the West Coast, just in a suburb just outside of Vancouver, British Columbia. A lot of you guys might have heard of the place from the Winter Olympics in 2010. Pretty populous place, about 2 hours north of Seattle and about 8 minutes or so drive from the U.S. Washington state border.
Oh, wow.
I've been running single solo operator lawn care business. This 2020 will be my 15th season, and have been doing some podcasting and stuff in the lawn care space as well the past 5 years.
Wow, dude, so you've been around for a minute. You're not the new kid on the block. You definitely have a lot of experience with what we're doing, and actually your story is really unique. You started with another company that you had franchised, if I'm not mistaken, and decided to kind of do your own thing shortly thereafter. So you have a way different story than a lot of folks, especially in the U.S., how we all kind of start up as the local lawn boy. You did this intentionally and a lot of thought behind what you're doing and still do. So it's going to be a really good podcast. Let's do this before we dive deep and we start unpackaging everything. Let's hear from the announcements, and we'll hear a little bit more from Julio Tome.
Keep yourself protected as you grow your lawn care business. It's 2020. We believe you should have options other than hot and heavy earmuffs or standard earplugs to protect your hearing. Get comfortable protection you deserve with IsoTunes. Our Bluetooth headphones merge high-quality audio with noise-blocking earplugs. Certified by OSHA, IsoTunes provides protection and delivers durability to last you season after season. Visit isotunes.com to find your fit.
Julio, before we get to present day, there's so much history with your business, and I want to maybe take people a little bit back in time. So you've been in the green industry for what, about 15 years, you would say now?
Yeah, it's been a long haul. In fact, it actually amazes myself when I think about it. Previous to that, I think the longest that I had a job was probably 5 years. So to jump into entrepreneurial, that space and starting my own business and to be at it still, with no other job for the last 15 years, is pretty big feat to accomplish.
Yeah. So let's. How did you get started in the industry though? Because from what I've heard on your story, and again, I thoroughly enjoy listening to your podcast every Tuesday. And you started Cloverdale, if I'm not mistaken, like lawn care or Cloverdale landscaping, but originally
Cloverdale Mowing. Yeah.
Cloverdale Mowing. Okay. So tell everybody your story. How did you get started in the industry? Because it was a little untraditional, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, initially through a slew of regular sort of part-time jobs and stuff. I was working at one point in time as a parts delivery driver, for a local Chrysler car dealership. And I'd have to cut across town to deliver these parts to certain service stations and stuff. And this one area of town, it's sort of like the richer part of town, I'd cut through, and I'd always see all these landscapers working. And through that, it sort of sparked the idea, because I would see these guys, and it just looked, to me, I just saw freedom. I didn't see work. I just saw, them outside on their, their own. They're their own boss. They're enjoying the sunshine, mowing lawns. It just, to me, it was instant appeal. But didn't take the step at that point. Just, it sort of sat in the back of my mind. And then through the course of just a few years getting other jobs, I came to a point in time where I had a job, and I started to dabble in lawn care. I was that homeowner that would take his 21-inch mower in the back of my old Mazda B2200 pickup truck with my $99 weed eater, and I thought, I'm gonna dabble in lawn care. And I would put flyers in neighborhoods that said lawn mowing $15, and I would get like one or two. I didn't even have a blower. I would just take a broom with me, and I did it all while having this other part-time job. And we'd just do a couple of lawns here and there. Nothing huge. Like, it wasn't, you couldn't even consider it a business or anything.
Sure.
But that sort of just was sort of a continuation of that sort of lawn care journey. I got to a point in time with my job, which I thought would be like the job I was going to do, where my wife had a baby. We were expecting the second. The first one was a cesarean section. The second we knew was going to be a scheduled cesarean section. I told work about it about 2 months in advance, because I knew that I would have to be home from the day of the birth on for, a few weeks at least to help my wife. Because, when you think about what's involved with a cesarean section, it's very difficult for her to get out of bed and lift the baby and stuff like that until she fully heals. So they said, hey, that's absolutely fine. Still plenty of time and all that sort of stuff. Fast forward to literally a few days before, I think it was a Friday, and I was supposed to start my time off. I think the scheduled delivery was like on the Sunday, and then I was supposed to not start showing up at work on the Monday. And they called me into the office and said, hey, unfortunately, you can't have the time off. We just had to fire a person, so now we're short. And I said, well, what are you talking about? Like, I've had this time scheduled for like 2 months now. Like, you guys knew. And they're like, yeah, unfortunately. I said, I can't, I'm not going to be here. I can't show up.
No.
And they said, well, if you don't show up on Monday, don't bother coming back.
Wow.
And the amount of stress, like, my skin is crawling just every time I tell the story.
Oh yeah.
The amount of stress that put me under, thinking that, I've got a wife and a baby at home, and I'm going to have a newborn, and now I have no job. I literally closed the door in the office and walked back to my spot and said to myself, I will never, ever work for somebody else again in my life. And that's when I started to fully think about lawn care. And throughout this time as well, there was this franchise company on the scene. They're from Australia. They had opened a franchise here. And I saw the trailers around. They were really nice and clean. And on the back of them, it always said, inquire, franchises available, inquire for details. So I literally found a trailer, tracked the guy down to like his next job, got out and just asked the guy, like, what's, this thing? And he just started explaining to me about the franchise and his experience buying into it and stuff like that. And I went home and talked to my wife about it and was like, what if I started a business where from day one, I'd have a guaranteed income, because that's what this franchise was offering. They were saying, hey, you have a guaranteed income right from day one of, I think it was like, at the time they were guaranteeing, this is like 15 years ago, $1,000 a week. And if you didn't make $1,000 a week, they would top you off to that point.
Okay.
So that you could have a sort of a standing, right?
Sure.
So I said, like, I'm super shy, I'm super introverted. My biggest fear in starting a business would be going to find customers. But if I bought a franchise, then they would take care of that.
Sure.
And I would just go do the work. So I decided to buy into the franchise, quit that job that I was at, and, did it for about 5 years in the franchise. Over time, through those other part-time jobs and stuff, I had always been entrepreneurial. I'd always thought of different businesses that I could start, and I had started other businesses on the side. I've done everything, like from having a sign company, doing vinyl decals and signage for vehicles. I had done security window bars and door locks and things like that. And there's a whole slew of things that I've tried while maintaining other part-time jobs. So that itch to have that sort of entrepreneurial spirit was always in me. And I found with the franchise that it was very restrictive of what you could do. I had all these ideas about how to grow my business, but I wasn't allowed to do any of them because they didn't fall within the rules of the franchise.
Sure.
And in 2010, we moved our house to another part of town. And because the franchise was linked to a specific area, I thought, this is the prime opportunity for me to leave the franchise, start my own lawn care business on my own, because in the franchise rules, if you leave, you can't work in that area in your territory for a period of 1 year. So I said, well, this is perfect. We're moving. So I don't want to work in that area anyways.
Sure.
So then that's like completely cuts all ties with the franchise, and I don't have to worry about any conflicts or anything. And so I did that. I started my business, and I started to put, just the ideas and the ways to market and grow my business into practice. And, originally I thought this is going to be tough. It might take me 3-4 years to, build a stable business. And within the first season, I was already full. And I was just like, this is awesome. Like everything that I had envisioned in my mind of what this brand or this company would look like has come to fruition.
Wow.
So yeah, basically, and it's been 15 years in total now. So the first 5 for the franchise, and this will be my 10th season on my own.
Look at you, man. That's awesome. Well, let me ask you this, because a lot of folks ask, myself and guys like you, different, people that are kind of more in front of the camera, like on YouTube and social media, what's the best way to start a lawn and landscape business? And my question is always, some folks, they get started in lawn care and landscaping, and it's like intentional, right? It's thought out. They're leaving corporate America. They've got money in the bank. They bought cash on equipment, other equipment cash, and they're ready to rock and roll. Other guys, like my story, like I fell into it. It was kind of out of a necessity. I did it when I was a kid. I thoroughly enjoy it now. I've never, quote unquote, really like had a bad day cutting grass. I get frustrated just like everybody else, but when it rains or something's going on. But what do you think? What's your take on folks getting started in a non-traditional fashion, like through a franchise or buying a company out, like versus starting off just cutting their teeth? Your story is a little bit different. So do you see any like pros or cons? Do you think it equipped you? Do you regret it, at all? Or what's the pros and cons of both sides, if you don't mind me asking? I
would say for pros and cons, the pros would be that it's sort of an easier, it's expensive to buy into a franchise, but if you know absolutely nothing, like I did learn a lot of lessons while at the franchise, got to do some training, basically on the job type training where they'd have somebody take me around for a few weeks and help me, learn what they're pricing their jobs at, learn how to, stripe a property, do the edging, all that sort of stuff. So I got a lot of lessons that way. The biggest and best takeaway from the franchise still to this day, I would say, is they had monthly meetings, and they would bring in some experts and stuff to talk about insurance and things like that, and different options like that. But it was always the camaraderie, I guess is the word, of just hanging out with the other franchisees and picking their brains. Because, I would ask them, like I remember one of my very first meetings I would say, okay, so, in the franchise, you'd get an equipment package, including a trailer and some basic mowing equipment and stuff. But some of the extras like an aerator and things like that weren't included.
Okay.
So I would ask guys, like, if you had to buy just one, what would you buy? Would you buy the aerator first, or would you buy the power rake first?
Sure.
Like, what would you, right? And and you get to get that advice from people, right? So it was just that is still to this day is the one thing I miss, was just the camaraderie. I can never say that word.
Yeah,
camaraderie with the other guys, of being able to pick their brains and stuff like that so early on. So with that, it was good. On the bad side or negative side, I would say it was paying monthly franchise fees. It was having to upfront a large cost to buy a franchise. And then the restrictions on stuff. Like, for example, for marketing, they would give you, in this particular instance, they would give you some flyers. You could go out and drop off door hangers or flyers. But you couldn't put your own phone number on it. It had to be the central office phone number. So I could spend a whole day putting out flyers if I'm trying to canvass like a new area or something, but there was no guarantee that those people would call or I would get the job. It could go to somebody else if they picked up a flyer. So those things like that really irked me over time. At the time they had a franchise, they had a website for the company, but it seemed to focus more on, at that time, on selling franchises rather than selling the services that we provide. So, we're all driving around with trailers and stuff that say, hey, go check out this company website.com. And, people would go look at it and it's all about, hey, buying a franchise versus
okay. I gotcha.
what we can offer. So that irked me as well. Cause I'm like, the franchise should be about, so those things like that. I think they've since changed some of the stuff. But at the time, it was enough for me to say, I could do this better on my own.
Sure.
And just decide to go out on my own.
It's funny because my first few years in business were a complete mess. It was a struggle for sure. Like, we made stuff up. I not pretended, but like I just made stuff up. Like, oh, somebody asked me something, like, yeah, sure, we'll go do that. Aerations, yeah, we'll do aerations, and I'd grab an aerator and tear up somebody's lawn and be like, all right, well, yeah, we'll just do that one for free. And then by the time I get to the third or fourth one, well, we learned a new skill set. Now we can charge for it, right? And so like it was so trial by fire, right? And so I always joke, like the first 7 to 10 years of my business, I just was literally flinging mud up against the wall, I think they say, and seeing what sticks. And we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Google, we didn't have lawn forum and Facebook groups. It's just not even fair, and I'm not like mad or resentful. Obviously, it's just not even in the same. It's not even the same conversation, right? But nowadays, there's just so many resources, and one of the things that I always used to say, and I always wonder, if I really would have pulled the trigger, if somebody would have presented this opportunity, was I always said, like, man, I would give away 5% of my profits if I had like a mothership, like a corporate office that could teach me how to do things correctly. Because I would take 90% of on the dollar to learn the industry and learn the business. Now, fast forward, I guess, funny how things come full circle. Now I'm like trying to teach everybody in the industry and basically give it away for free. And so it's just one of those things though, where it sounds good in your first like infancy years to like learn everything from somebody and just pay a royalty, but long term, like you still kind of want that profit. Like you want to, that 10, 15, 20% or 8%, whatever the franchise fee, like that stuff can add up, long term. And I feel like that's kind of what you were just echoing. Is that something you're kind of relating to? Yeah,
it was just a hard pill to swallow and as I, would encounter issues like when my franchise was in an area that wasn't the greatest. So, when I'd ask customers to give them a quote and stuff, it would be like, it wasn't, can you come and cut my lawn month or weekly? It was like, what's the least amount of time that you have to come to do this?
Oh,
right?
Sure.
We just don't want to pay. We don't want to pay for it, right? Do you want fertilizers? No. Do you want aeration? No. Whereas other franchisees that were just across town in other neighborhoods were like doing everything: hedge trimming, lawn mowing, all that sort of stuff, fertilizers, and it was like what a huge difference. And the office would always tell me that, oh no, it doesn't make a difference where you are. Like there's work everywhere and stuff. And yeah, there's work everywhere, but some the clientele is different, right? Whether
100%.
they want to have pride in their neighborhood and everybody's got nice trim lawns and edges and stuff like that, versus lawns where it's unlooked after and they just want it cut so that the city isn't hounding them and finding them on their property taxes and stuff,
right?
Because the lawns aren't cut. So and that was the situation I was in, and I think that helped obviously when I moved, because I moved across town into a nicer neighborhood,
right?
And focused in on that neighborhood and just used all the marketing stuff that was floating around in my head, and I think that's what helped just grow the business exponentially.
That's really, I appreciate you sharing, because not too many folks, in on social media and YouTube and Instagram and podcasts, if you will, have that same background that folks get to tell that story. I think you're really unique in that scenario. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure somebody that's listening to this is probably evaluating a franchise right now, or, do I buy a business off of somebody? And I think they have their merits. I don't know if it's like a permanent solution, but, I always say if you got to learn the industry, that's probably the best way to do it, or work for somebody, There's no shame in working for somebody for $12 an hour, $15 an hour, $25,000 a year, for 4, 5, 6 months, learning the industry and then starting your own thing. I can't tell you how many times I've worked for free on so many different jobs and crews to learn something, or a trade or a skill set, or construction or demo or electrician work, cause they're just life skills, well, let's do this. Let's transition to, go ahead. You got some more that you can share on that?
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think what I've learned from the process, I'm a bit further along than you in terms of age goes. But what I've learned is that mindset is like the biggest thing. The reason I bought a franchise was because basically, like I said, I'm shy and stuff, and this will solve that problem, that they will be the answer to that because they're providing the customers. When in reality, it was just making an excuse.
Right. Right.
In past businesses, like I've mentioned, I've tried all different sorts of businesses that all failed. Now that I'm older, I look back and go, I could 100% rock those businesses today.
Right.
I could make those businesses succeed because of what I know today. It was all me. It was all making excuses for why those businesses failed. When there's a famous Jim Rohn speech. I love Jim Rohn. Yeah. Where he was talking and he would say, he had a set of goals and things to do. And his mentor was asking him, what's a list of reasons? Tell me your list of reasons of why, you haven't succeeded. And he went through his whole list, and he was super proud of that list because it was like all this stuff he was putting off, and he was so prepared to answer his mentor. And his mentor looked at him and said, "There's one problem with your list. You're not on it." And It was like, it just hit home, right? It was like, when I think about that, and the franchise was one other thing. It was just an excuse,
right,
to do it because I thought it would solve that problem. Looking back now, it's all mindset. It's all those limiting self-beliefs that, you're not going to get a customer here. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. So that was like the sort of the biggest lesson that I learned with that has now sort of transitioned into the other things that I've done.
Huh. Interesting. Well, no, I mean, I appreciate you being candid, because I would agree. My biggest enemy in my first 10 years was me. It was, just such a head fake, just being afraid of my own shadow sometimes, it's funny, like people think I'm a people person, and I have learned as a skill set to be personable, but you guys got to look at the track record. Like I was working at True Green with headphones on in a tanker truck all day with nobody, by design. Right. And I cut grass with headphones in for 10 hours a day, like you guys do. And I don't talk to anybody. Like my normal, personality type or spirit about me is I'm not really like outgoing. I don't get charged up with people. Now, my wife, Liz loves talking to people. Liz is a socialite. She's a social butterfly. She can go to a party and come out, 2 hours later and be totally charged. I come out of a party and I'm dead. I'm like, all right, I don't want to talk to anybody for 2 days, you know? So like you said, you gotta know yourself, I guess, is one thing we talk a lot about on our podcast. And I want to ask you though, to still dance on this topic for a second, because where you're at is a little bit more unique still with how you got started, but then also the region you're in. I mean, honestly, you're one of only a handful of people I know in is it called the Pacific Northwest? Is that where you guys would like geographically say you are, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
it would still be the Pacific North, or the Pacific Northwest there. Yeah.
So you guys,
it's crazy. You
get crazy rain and
rain. Yeah. Like 80% of the year. I always laugh when I'm on social media.
Yeah.
And I see the posts from people putting up like, hey, it's a rain day. Guess we'll be in the shop doing maintenance.
Yeah.
And it's like, just, you wouldn't have a business if you were stopping for a rain day here.
Really?
Because there's no telling how long it could go. It could go 2 weeks straight of rain. And then what are you going to do?
Wow.
Go catch up on lawns that haven't been cut in the growing season for 2 weeks.
So what's
like there's no way.
Why is that? What is it, like the mountains or like the ocean?
Well, I guess this was all just temperate rainforest. And there still is parts of it that if you're not in the city, you go, it's just the way it is with I guess the way that environment works and stuff, right? Like it's still very like if you look at Canada as a whole, the population, like you look at the US, the population is obviously massive. It's like, I think the whole population of Canada is the population of California.
Wow.
So that gives you sort of a sense. But geographically, the size of Canada is like the second largest space or area on the planet.
Sure.
Landmass. It's just huge, but the whole population is just along that U.S. border. Basically, there's some areas where it goes up a little bit farther, like on back east and stuff, in Alberta and things. There's some areas where it goes up farther north and stuff. But most of it is down along that region, right? The rest of that is just rugged, like
desert
think
land.
Alaska, right?
Yeah.
So that's like, it's just forest and just craziness. That whole region, that the temperatures, the rain, the stuff, it's just all from that temperate rainforest. So it just has a lot of challenges, especially here on the West Coast. On the East Coast, it's different. They get a lot of snow and things like that. On the West Coast, it's a lot warmer. So we get snow, but it's maybe once a year, twice a year sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's mainly just rain solid, right? So you're just always working in the rain, and it presents a ton of challenges with equipment and rutting and stuff. And then where I'm at, in the suburb that I'm in, there's a ton of clay in the soil. So you get about a foot of soil, and then it hits like solid clay.
Sure.
So when it rains, it just fills up like a bowl because the water can't penetrate that clay.
Mm-hmm.
So it just sits in that one foot of soil, and then slowly takes a long time to drain. But then you've got rain every day, so it's crazy. You go out there to mow a lawn, and it's just water everywhere, squishing around you, but you have no choice. You gotta do it.
Well, it's funny because I remember you and I, you get to work with Xmark, which is really cool. A huge blessing in your business, I know too. And you had told me that they're sending you I think it was a push mower. Maybe they're like commercial 30. It might be self-propelled actually, but it has like a new like alloy deck or something like that. And they were really geeked to get it to you because you're in a really unique region, like we were just talking about with all this rain and they were like, wow, we got this new mower and we want to like get it into hands. I'm like, I know a guy, and a lot of networking. You received that mower, and you were like, I'm like, yeah, you could maybe ask him for like a big mower, like a 0-turn or something fancy, right? And you're like, you're like, no. I'm like, why would you turn that down? And you're like, that doesn't. You're like, there's no way. You were laughing at me. You were like, there's no way. Like I'm like, I didn't understand. I didn't understand it because in the States, even if you're in like suburbia, it's still pretty wide open, arguably. Unless you're like really in like an urban environment. And that's just not what you guys run. Like you tell everybody your equipment evolution because I think there's a really good story there.
Started out, like I said, when you get the franchise, when I started out, you got a 21-inch mower because we're in the city, smaller lots. That's what every landscape company has here. It's all 21-inch mowers. The bigger mowers are, not seen there. For the city has the zero turns for parks and things, and you'll see some landscape companies that take care of some city contracts and things that'll have some of that stuff. But generally, for homeowners or like residential properties, it's not what you would use. So I started off, actually, my first big mower was like a John Deere tractor, and rocked the 42-inch John Deere tractor. And then I started having some issues with, and again, just inexperience, having issues with, because the other craziness, if the rain wasn't enough, it's that every lawn here is bagged. Like everybody wants their lawns bagged for that clean,
all the clippings,
look.
Okay.
Yeah, the clippings. So you're collecting clippings on every property, wet or dry.
Wow.
So
that's a nightmare.
I started having issues with this John Deere tractor on trying to bag, because you'd have to put this bagger thing on the back with this big plastic tube on the side, and there was no like fan mechanism or anything, so the clippings would just get clogged right away in that tube. So I started researching other mowers, and I think about a Gravely zero turn, like a really tiny one at first.
Okay.
I think it was like a 34-inch compact Z or something, and it was the same issue, having issues with it getting clogged. And so I started seeing the walkers with those big hoppers on the back, and the franchise was all the guys in Australia. They all love those things. So I was like, okay, well, that's, sounds like a proven winner. So I dropped, I think it was like 14 or 15 grand back in 2007 for the walker.
Wow.
And it was awesome. It worked phenomenally, but the weight of that thing, even being just a 42-inch and with that whole GHS system and stuff, there was literally like an inch or so of clearance underneath. So you put that on a wet lawn and it would get stuck
just
the minute the machine would go on it. It would just bottom out, and then you're spinning tires, and it was just impossible. So I think after like 4 years with that thing, I might have had 200 hours on it.
Oh wow!
Because I just couldn't. It spent 90% on the trailer. Because it was like the conditions were too wet, or properties were too small to get it into the backyard, and it's like, well, I'm not going to unload it for just the front yard and then have to go push them out the back. I might as well just do the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I ended up having to get rid of it and sell it, and so it was just a case of gates were just not set up for that, and just the weight of the machine was like so heavy. And I ended up going back to a tractor, because I was like, well, if it's going to sit on my trailer for like 90% of the time, then I'll just get a cheap tractor that can help me out when I can, and I'll use that. And I used it successfully. It actually did really well because of the weight of it. It was so light. If it ever got like stuck or was looking like it was going to get stuck, it was so easy to push because it was just essential John Deere Trent. And, I was using that fine up until it got stolen with my whole trailer and everything out of my driveway.
Right. I totally forgot about that.
So,
holy crap.
I used that.
It's a whole other story.
Yeah. So so that got all stolen and stuff. And then by that point in time, I was already starting to do the podcast and stuff. And I figured, I should probably, instead of getting another tractor, let me start experimenting again with different types of equipment that I can then talk about on the podcast, about like different commercial equipment and stuff, right? So I started to look at, because I'd always heard about walk behinds and stuff like that, seemed to be like the gold standard in the US. Like everybody would say, like every lawn care company should at least have a 36-inch walk behind mower and stuff, and this is going back to 2015 or so at the point, right? And stand-ons were still just kind of getting popular and things. So I thought, hey, I'll give that a try, and it actually has worked out really well because the weight of the machine, I think it was a turf tracer that I got, and the weight of it was equal to the John Deere tractor, except it was actually better because I wasn't actually sitting on it. So I'm behind it, right? So I could get a sulky. I could use that when it was good conditions. If it was wet, I could put the sulky up, and then that made the machine even lighter, and could use that, and it's worked well. There's times still where it's still too heavy for that, And this past year as well, through working with Exmark, they gave me one of their 32-inch Stars mowers to try out. So I've been using that. And again, it's the same situation where it's some days if the conditions are right, I can use it. Other days, got to push mow because it's just it's not worth the risk of tearing up people's lawns.
That's crazy.
To save some. Yeah, so it's I always tell these companies that I try to work with equipment, I'm like, you know what? I work in like probably the most challenging conditions. So if your machine can make it here, it can make it anywhere. Like if it can work here, then it's pretty much good anywhere. After that.
It's funny, dude, because I'm thinking out loud, like just all the rain and like I'm just painting this image of my mind of like having like these beautiful homes and everything's always like wet or rain or, you know, an everyday shower like they get in like South Florida and stuff like that. And I'm like, like that's just I hate rain. Like for example, in this last spring in Michigan, we had and somebody knows the numbers, but it was like 120 out of like 150 days were rain, or it was something absolutely ridiculous. Like 2 out of 3 days was rain. And I'm just like, you know, everybody's banging their head on the wall. We all got mulch to install, flowers to install. And you know, like just imagine this. I didn't get my flowers installed until like way after, Memorial Day. I think it is right in early May in the US. And, that's usually like our cutoff, you know, and like we want to be done by that, and that you know that didn't happen until like first part of June, and but that seems like this seems like regular life up there by you guys. So I guess count my blessings, right? It's actually one of the things where one of the things I did before I bought that franchise was as a homeowner, because I was like, okay, well, if I'm thinking about this is something I'm going to have to deal with. So I actually started as a homeowner mowing my own lawn in the rain, and the neighbors would look at me like, what the heck are you doing? Like, why would you mow your lawn in the rain? They had no idea that I was thinking about starting a lawn care business or buying a franchise. They were just looking at their crazy neighbor waiting till the wettest day possible to take out their mower and start mowing the lawn. And It was because I was testing myself. I was like, I'm going to have to deal with this on a daily basis. So if I can't do it now, then I better not be starting a lawn care business, right? So I literally for months was just mowing my lawn once a week or twice a week out in the rainiest days, just to see if, you know, on a tiny micro scale of doing one property, if you enjoy it,
you know, how it was, right?
Oh my God, that's funny. I that's actually really smart and really wise too. Cause, like I said, some of us, we just got started out of necessity. You're actually trying to be a little bit more thoughtful and methodical, you know, and by the way, I probably should have this at the beginning. I anytime I talk about equipment, I always tell people like, hey, you know, you got to decide what is the best equipment for you. Like I talk about it on my channel, and I know you do as well. Until we're blue in the face, like don't just buy equipment because like your favorite YouTuber has it, or like you said, like you said, Julio, like stand-ons are everything. I'm like, stand-ons could be a great opportunity. It could be an awful opportunity. You know, like walker mowers are huge in like the New England states, from what I understand, where we live. I don't, you know, and then another region, they could be the not optimal mower. So it's always like, before you, and just because they are $6,000, $10,000, $12,000, $18,000, like, it's getting kind of runaway freight train pricing, in my opinion, but you know, just with, you know, tariffs and steel and taxes and all this mess, I get it. So just be thoughtful. You know, I always say like, not to beat a dead horse while we're here, but just the demo equipment first, and, you know, grow incrementally, you know, and, don't get more than you need. You know, you can go trade a mower in and usually get 80 or 90% of it back, you know, no problem. They hold their value. So it's not like you're buying a Honda, you know, that loses 30% of its value. So, cause you know, Walker mower makes a good mower, and I know you're not throwing them under the bus. It just wasn't right for your business model back then, you know? So I don't want to.
No, I love Walker mowers. Like I absolutely love them. If I could, have one again, it was a phenomenal machine when the conditions were right. Especially when leaf season started happening, it was like nobody's business, man. That thing, it was absolutely awesome. It just wasn't right for my business, for the conditions that I'm in.
For sure, for sure.
Work. But no, the walkers are phenomenal. I to this day, I still love them. I actually had to go in at GIE. I saw I think is Bob Walker.
Yeah.
So I had to go shake his hand. Because I was like, I love these machines. Like they're so awesome. And it's funny because he was like all happy as I'm telling him about how much I love it. And then I told him how I had to sell mine because of the thing. And you kind of saw a smile go to a frown. So I was like, I hope I'm not breaking it.
No. And I only say
kind of funny, but I was like, man, but I love your machine.
Yeah, no. And I only say that because like, I know like there's Walker fanboys cause I'm like an X-Mark fanboy, right? There's Skag fanboys. And I don't want to be like, cause Walker fanboys are like, they have like Walker in the blood, you know? So I don't want 17 emails, oh, Brian's Law Maintenance doesn't like Walker. No, we like Walker. I have nothing against Walker. I was like, dude, you just gotta make sure like there like certain mowers out there will do better in certain environments. Like there's certain brands up here that we don't use because we got Kentucky Blue and they in my opinion don't cut worth a darn up here, you know. So just to throw that in there, a little disclaimer. You can't do anything in America without a disclaimer in 2020.
I will say from everything that I had heard before, I mentioned like the people talking about the walk behinds and stuff like that. I will say that 36-inch turf tracer still is the most versatile mower I've ever used in the 14 seasons that I've gone through. You can do everything with that, from walking behind it, obviously, to riding a sulky, to mowing inclines with it. They're just phenomenal how versatile of a machine that a 36-inch with like a floating deck is. Just and being a hydro drive type machine. It's just absolutely awesome.
Well, it's funny because I did a FAQ video. People always ask me like, what's the best starter mower? And I did a video. My opinion is still like an X-Mark turf tracer, 48 or 60-inch deck with the floating deck and the hydro, because you can get them for $5,000 to $6,000 and you can get them used for 3, 4, 5. They're amazing little units. I had one. I had a little Metro, which was a fixed deck, 32 or 33, and mine was a belt drive. So mine would have been like what you had, but like the one below it, like without the bells and whistles. And I had it for a long while, like 4 or 5 years, until I just got rid of my gated backyards, naturally. And I just went to all wide open properties, So, no, dude, I appreciate you sharing about equipment because everybody always wants to know like what's the equipment and what's the setup and all this other jazz, Let's go ahead.
Just to touch on one last point there. The other thing I would say, kind of touching on points that we've all sort of discussed between mindset, equipment and stuff, is that you see is guys will, be like, I'm going to start a lawn care business. And the first thing they do is go to their dealer and drop a whole bunch of cash on equipment.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, what are you doing?
No, like that's not the way to do it.
Research what you need first. And like you're saying, but like, it'll take you 30 minutes to go to the dealer and buy equipment. Like, get your customers first. Get the jobs lined up first, then you can go and think. But people are always doing it backwards. They're like, oh, I need the equipment before I start doing anything else. And then they're sitting on monthly payments and things. And, it's just that. And you see it with everything. I've seen it with YouTubers and things like that. Oh, I got to buy this camera before I start my channel. No. You've got a phone with a camera. Right. You can start shooting videos with that. Don't drop a bunch of money on gear and stuff like that. It's just, and like I say, it's just from my experience looking back, I can sort of recognize those things. I'm like, it's just excuses. Stop making excuses to yourself. Just get out there.
Sweat
do
equity.
What's important first. Do the hard work. Get the customers. Then you can buy the stuff to support that.
Amen.
Once you have those jobs lined up.
We talked about that. Actually, I did a podcast episode with Alex Nickens, and we talked about like new versus used equipment. If people want to go down that rabbit hole a little bit more, it was a really good podcast on that topic. No, I totally agree. I got about another 20-25 minutes with you. If let's do this. Let's take a quick break. Hear from the announcements, just to kind of shake it off a little bit, and then I want to talk to you about podcasting. I want to talk to you about your lawn care business success podcasting and social media, because you have arguably probably the largest resource in the green industry that I know of in terms of podcasts. So I know one of us both have a mutual friend, Paul Jameson, and he's got the Green Industry podcast, and he's just an amazing guy. He's another guy that coaches me doing my podcast, and just another tremendous asset to the lawn care community. But you as well have been doing this for 4 or 5 years. You have like 200 or 300 episodes stockpiled, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast. I said, Julio, I'm launching my podcast. I want to send some folks hopefully your way because you have, just literally, out of respect, I know how hard it is to make YouTube videos. I know how hard it is to make, content. And now I'm, for whatever odd reason, apparently I'm into the being an S&M because I'm just adding more pain and not pleasure to doing podcast. I'm just having fun because here's the thing. I truly really do respect people that create content because, I'll say this is that people that consume it, it's easy to consume, but I always tell people try producing content, and it's easy to do a video or a podcast, but try doing a podcast every single week for 212 weeks or whatever you're up to now. That's a commitment, and I'm so impressed and proud of you, and just respect what you've put together. So I want to unpackage that. I want to know the why, the how, the what, because it's a labor of love. So let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll hear from the announcements again, and we'll dive right back into it.
Step up your hearing protection game this season with ISO Tunes. Our headphones merge high-quality audio with noise-blocking earplugs. So ditch those hot and heavy muffs or upgrade your non-protective earbuds. Our newest release, ISO Tunes Pro 2.0, offers 16 hours of battery life and is completely waterproof. Treat your ears to OSHA-certified hearing protection at isotunes.com today.
So lawn care business success, the phenomenon of podcasting taking the world by storm, right? And I'm having fun here because when I'm riding my lawnmower, man, I know it's Tuesday. Okay, it is Tuesday. I get them bright and early because I know you let them out at 6 a.m. And it's so cool because it's not just interviews or just business. It's you never know what you're gonna get, in a good way. It's sometimes it's just you solo. Sometimes you got an interview with, a Stanley Dirt Monkey or a Paul Jameson or, somebody lawn care. And it's cool to just hear other people's stories, man. And before we actually hit record, you and I were talking about how podcasting is just gaining so much momentum in the marketplace because the people consuming audio has just been crazy. Whether you're on a flight or you got downtime or you're in the factory and you can, have some earbuds on. And I think a lot of that happens to just correlate to the technology catching up with iPhones and smartphones and earbuds, right? So so take us back 4 or 5 years ago. How did you even get the idea to start a podcast? I guess as blanket question as it is, and then a green industry podcast because nobody was doing that, and now. Yeah, I'm not going to quote numbers because, out of respect, if you want to share numbers, you can. But you're a juggernaut. People don't understand. You have a good podcast, even if it wasn't in the green industry category. So by downloads sakes, but now you have arguably the largest green industry podcast, and I'm coming from the number one spot, okay? Because I'm competitive. No, I'm just I'm just having fun, dude. I did not start that war, so I'm just having fun. But share with us your story. Where did you get the idea for the podcast and starting a way to give back? Because I think it's really really impressive.
I'm a huge nerd. Is pretty much it. A huge nerd, a huge geek. You ask my family, one word to describe your dad or your husband, that's what they're going to say. He's a geek. He's a nerd. I love technology. I love, back to grade 1 was the first year when I was in grade 1, we had a computer lab for the very first time. And the moment I sat in front of a Commodore 64, I fell in love with technology. And I remember nerding out at 7, 8 years old, talking about modems. Look at this thing. You can stick a phone, a rotary phone handset on this thing, and it'll call across the other side of the world. Yeah. And you can, chat messages with somebody. And my family and members are like, what the heck is this kid talking about? Right. It's just, so it started early. So as I got into listening or working with my business and stuff, I love technology. So I consume a lot of technology on YouTube and things like that. And, I heard about podcasts and things like that. And I got tired of listening to the radio. Listening to music was always repetitive.
Yeah.
Listening to politics was always the same arguments back and forth.
Sure.
It just got so depressing and tired. I was like, what if I could be learning something or, something engaging that I like? So I started hearing about these podcasts. I started looking into it on the iPhone. It made it very easy because there was a podcast app that you could download at the time. And there was this whole new world of audio that you could listen to for free. It was like listening to custom tailored radio stations or radio shows.
Mm-hmm.
And not surprisingly, my first podcast that I downloaded was called Mac Break Weekly. And it's all about Mac computers.
Huh.
And to this day, I still listen to it every week. I would spend hours working, listening to podcasts. And from the moment I started, probably about 3 years or so, so probably my second year in business, I started listening to podcasts. And about 3 years before I decided to go do one myself, I was just that's all I listened to while I mowed lawns was podcasts.
Okay.
So you're talking 2000, what would that have been? I can't even remember now, but I started thinking about it, and because I was such a nerd, it was like, I'd really like to do a podcast myself. This sounds like something, and I'm super shy, but hey, it's a microphone.
Yeah,
like nobody's looking at me. It's not on camera. It's like, sort of thing, right? So I started thinking about it, and I was like, okay, but what would I do a podcast about? My thought was always that it would be a tech podcast because that's what I loved.
Okay, sure.
And I just couldn't settle on what I would call it, whether it would be, like an Apple specific type podcast, because that's what I was into at the time, or whether it would be a broader. It was just procrastination thinking about it. So then I would listen to a lot of podcasters that would teach podcasting.
Okay.
And so I'd learn all these things about podcasting, and they would say, your first 100 episodes are probably not going to be very good and stuff like that, but don't sweat it. Just kind of put out the episode. So I started to think about that and said, well, what if I just started a podcast about lawn care? Then at least I wouldn't have to worry about the topics because I've been doing it long enough that, I've got enough that I can talk about, and then I can concentrate on, trying to get comfortable because I'm so introverted.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I finally decide what I really want to make a podcast about, I could stop the lawn care one and do the real podcast.
Sure.
5 years later and 232 episodes later, I'm still doing a podcast about lawn care.
That's funny right there.
But
funny how that works.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. Holy cow. So 230 episodes.
It's been a crazy journey.
So so let me ask you this though, what gives you the motivation to do these and to keep doing them? Because initially did you feel like you were going to be able to get all these interviews and all these different guests on the show? And I mean, really, they're really, really good, and the production quality is just incredible, way better than mine. Mine's mine's on a shoestring budget. Okay, yours sounds really good. Because you actually, I think, don't you have a background in like broadcasting and radio or something like that? Or you were telling me something, I thought.
Yeah. When I graduated high school, when I was in high school, you're talking like the 80s, early 90s. Mm-hmm. It was all hair bands and stuff like that. I was into heavy metal, Motley Crue, Guns N' Roses, all that sort of stuff. And I had learned how to play guitar. I was taking guitar lessons, spent a whole bunch of money on a Gibson Les Paul, and I was just totally into that scene, and decided after high school that I would go into audio engineering.
Okay.
So I saved a bunch of money from my paper route ever since I was like a kid, and dumped a whole bunch of money on an audio engineering course, and did that, and went and worked at some studios and stuff part time to sort of learn that, and just found here in where I'm from in Vancouver, they call it like Hollywood North, so lots of movies and stuff are filmed here. So most of although it's famous here for some really big albums like AC/DC's, I think it was called, what the heck was it called? Razor's Edge, like the Thunderstruck album.
Okay.
And like the Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood, like there's some really Aerosmith's, I forgot what the album, Pump album, like some really famous albums were recorded at some specific studios here in Vancouver. So there was this huge scene happening, but to get into those studios was like next to impossible because you're talking about like these huge rock stars and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So all of the other studios were all doing post-production for movies. So I would work at those studios.
Okay.
And I just found it's completely different. It was so boring because you'd be sitting there for hours and hours doing like a fight scene. I remember this particular one where it was sort of where I decided that this wasn't for me anymore. I was working on this fight scene for this B movie, and it was just like I got all the punches all lined up and all that, and they would come in and go, yeah, it just doesn't sound right, just doesn't. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like it sounds like they're fighting. I'm like, nobody's gonna watch it. It's a B movie. Like nobody
cares.
Nobody's watching. Nobody cares. Like I've spent like 10 hours on this already. Like and to me, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like it's just. At least this part of it, I'd always wanted to do it for the music side, not for that side. So
quick career.
I decided at that time, yeah. And, to get into those big studios, it was all who you know. And, then you'd get in and, you'd have to get coffee for them for a few years and just sweep the floors and stuff like that. And that's great if that's really what you wanted. But I started to see that it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't worth it for me to continue. So, yeah, so it's kind of funny fast forwarding to now to going, oh, well, I guess, I actually learned or used some of the stuff that I learned back then in that engineering school for the podcast now and stuff like that.
It's just funny seeing it come all full circle, you know what I mean? And so did you know when you first started off the podcast, like, because mine's like more like intentional, like we're breaking into this by design, again, just to have another another avenue to like give back and to pour back into you guys. And honestly, I just love networking. I love hearing people's stories. I'm a big story nerd. I love talking to people. Again, it is kind of like on home field advantage because I'm in my garage right now. Nobody can see what's, in front of me, but I'm sitting in my garage on my stool. I'm just kind of chilling here by myself. And I'm like, it's probably 10,000 people listening and you and I are having a conversation, but really I'm here by myself, kind of hiding. And I kind of like it,
Yeah.
But I know I wanted mine to be green industry still related to folks because that's what I do. And that's what you guys probably do as you're listening to this, as you're cutting grass or trimming. But when you got started, did you see it as big as you have it going on today with all the different interviews and guests, or did you just really, I remember you saying like you just wanted to document, your business first for like the first 100 episodes or something like that. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, I had no intention of doing interviews because of the introvertedness and the shyness. It was the audience that kept asking me to do interviews.
Okay.
That over time I finally relented and did interviews because they'd say, hey, you should interview Brian's Lawn Maintenance. You should interview Jason Ambrose. You should interview all these people. So I was like,
sure.
I guess I'll try. And there was a person that I did, and he kind of broke the ice for me. And he was my first episode, and he shared just the craziest stuff on his first episode about his challenges in lawn care and how at one point in his life he was so low and went into his garage and pulled out a gun and was about to commit suicide.
Wow.
And this is my first interview episode.
That's heavy.
And it was heavy, but I saw the impact right there that it could make for others listening.
Sure. 100%.
And I was like, wow, like that's huge. Right. And I was just so blessed that he shared that with me. And it gave me the confidence. He also made it so easy and everything went smooth.
Mm-hmm.
There was no issues or technically or anything like that it gave me the confidence to go and do some more. And I started to see some things in my kids as well, with their shyness and introvertedness starting to creep up and them not wanting to take opportunities because of that. And I looked back and saw all the missed opportunities I had because of it. So I was kind of like, well, this stops now, sort of thing, right? I'm going to show them by example of what you can do if you step out of that comfort of doing it, right? And I'm going to start doing these interviews, as much as I can, at least in the winter months when I'm thing. And that's what really started to with the YouTube channel, to start and just get out there and take off that last sort of veil of, hiding behind the microphone, and going, I'm going to do it in front of a camera too, and do some videos and stuff like that. And it's funny because for me, you asked, maybe some of the things like why I do it and stuff. And it's funny because I think to this day still about, hey, maybe I should do another podcast about tech or something like that. And when I think about it, I go now, like, it just doesn't appeal to me anymore. As much as I still love tech, it's still my favorite thing.
Sure.
I go, and it's because it's like, but who cares? What
impact?
How would that be making an impact in the world on talking about the newest iPhone or something like that, versus what I'm talking about now? And from the letters and comments and messages I get from people, and the experience, at GIE with people coming up to me and just being like nervous to talk to me and stuff like that. And I was just like, it just like hit home, and seeing the reviews on iTunes.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, like it's just making a difference. Right. And that's what matters most now. And I guess it's translating. It's funny, this past summer, we have a recreational property at a campground, and I'm usually been pretty shy and keep to myself, but my kids noticed that I'd be talking to the neighbors now and stuff like that. And my daughter walked past me I was like talking to a few neighbors, and she walked past me and she goes, "Look at Mr. Social," and and she started laughing, right? And I was like, wow, like what an impact! Like even I haven't noticed how much I've grown. GIE, like walking around with my camera pointed at me in front of all those people, like, and I didn't care. It was just like, or going through, going to an Echo event and going to the Chicago airport and walking with my camera. People are looking at you, and I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I'm never going to see you again. I don't care what you think about me. Like,
well, you hope so. Now you're,
right?
now you're famous. So now everybody's going to see you. You know what I mean? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. But it's just been, just from pulling that, just the self-growth has been the biggest motivating. It's not money, I'll tell you that.
For sure.
Doing podcasts, because I'm a stickler on audio quality, or try to be. A lot of the episodes, and I don't do batch recording, so I do the episodes every week. So I will actually give up a Monday morning work to do the podcast episode, because that's the quietest time at home.
Okay.
There's no kids around. My wife's at work. The neighborhood's quiet, so I can get the best audio quality.
Yeah.
But I'm losing income. And even with a couple of sponsors here and there, it still doesn't make up for the time. And my wife will be like, "Why do you still do it? Like, why do you?" And I can't explain it, but it's just like something tells me to keep doing it, keep going, and I get some just more inner satisfaction from doing it and helping people out, and just just sharing what I can, and just making it, if I can, making it easier. I understand, and I tell people, listen to the episodes with a grain of salt, because what I'm doing might not work for you,
right?
But this is honestly stuff that's worked for me. This is what I've tried. This is what I worked. That doesn't mean that there's not a better way to do it. You may be listening going, this guy's out to lunch. He has no clue. He shouldn't even have a podcast and stuff. But it's like, honestly, it's what's worked for me. Right. So,
right.
And like I said, that doesn't mean that there couldn't be a better way of doing it. But that's just sort of where I come from with it, is just sort of share, what it is, and try to make it, easier for other people.
Well, I'll be honest with you, man. I appreciate that, because there's all the time when I'm cutting grass, and like you said, to be totally honest with you, I just kind of get bored listening to music. My people are always asking me, like, what are you listening to? And my morning routine, usually, like when I'm cutting grass at 7, 8, 9 in the morning, I'm weird. Like I always seem to start with like praise and worship music, because I like to get some of that time in. And for me, I'm a Christian, so I enjoy that. And so So I'm listening to like all my Lauren Daigle, radio stations on Pandora, right? And then like normally about like, I'll be honest, after about 9, this sounds awful, but after about 9, I'm like, all right, I'm sick of this. Like this, it sounds kind of kumbaya sometimes, so I'm like, all right, I need like something a little bit more motivational. So I'm like putting on a business podcast, usually about like 9 or 10. And by then like the morning dew's burned off and it's like go mode, and so then I'm listening to like the Gary V's and the Grant Cardones and the Darren Hardys and the people that I enjoy listening to podcasts to, the Andy Frisellas, right? And they're just like they're just like in your face, you click it and it's just you know what I'm saying? Like they just it's like a football back in football, somebody's just grabbing your mask and just ripping you across the field, and you're 7 years old. That's just my interpretation, okay? And man, it'd be an honor to have like those kind of folks on the podcast one day, just because, right? Because they're just insane personalities and just alpha males, right? And then then I'm normally like do lunch, and then I do I might hit some Pandora again with some music, and then usually like between like 1 and 3 or 1 and 4, like I'm usually listening to business podcasts again, and again I listen to the guys I just mentioned. I listen to your podcast. I listen to a couple other ones that are out there. And they're not all lawn care related. Like I love, like any other red-blooded male right now, listen to like Joe Rogan and those kind of guys, right? But it is one of those things where like my first 7 or 8 years in business, like I only had like Pandora. We only had like streaming music services on Apple, and that's fine, but it's not really like feeding your brain. It's just kind of rotting your brain, And I always tell people like you got to be conscientious and careful what you let into your ear gate and your eye gate. And, the reality is that when you're listening to AM radio or FM radio, those people make like $30,000 a year. And their whole role is to sell you stuff, sell you timeshares, sell you cars, sell you on the newest phone, sell you on the newest, clothing. And it doesn't really serve you. It just really takes money out of your pocket. Now, you listen to an ad on a podcast, it's an entirely different role. We're selling products that, you pretty much would use. So we always appreciate those supports. When people buy those, use the codes, right? But that's a whole nother topic. But the reason I just say thank you for making your podcast available is because that's what I was listening to for the last, arguably 2 years. And I still remember episode 89, man. That was one of the probably first 10 or 20 maybe interviews that you did when you were starting to like break out of that element. And it was really cool because you and I got to know each other at the Echo UAG stuff. I didn't know you from Adam. Back then I had, maybe 1,000 subscribers, 1,500 subscribers. I was there with Kevin Fall River, a couple other guys, and you were there. And I was like, well, who's that guy? He's not even on YouTube. And I don't even know if you were back then. This is probably circa 4 years ago. Right. And, it's funny because they're like, yeah, he's the podcast guy. And I'm like, and back then they had like Instagram guys, and there's like some guys with like 5,000 followers on Instagram. I'm like, well, what the hell is an Instagram, right? My wife does that. And so you were like the podcast guy. We became buds. We were able to keep in touch. And then, ironically enough, the podcast guy, Julio, helped me became the Instagram guy to get me on Instagram, which was just funny. So I owe like your catalyst to help me get on Instagram 2.5 years ago. But I just, you were like the first one that interviewed me, and I was able to like, quote unquote, tell my story. And I'm like, what is that? And people are like always asking like, oh, how'd you get started? And like, what did you do before? And what did you do for work? And we have, an episode, I think it's like one of the first ones that I cut on my podcast, just kind of, giving an updated version of my story. But I still refer people back to your episode because it was so raw. It was so uncut. It was so just, off the cuff, and it was just a fun conversation. And I was an even younger version of myself, and I don't pretend to have it all figured out, but I a lot of words just to say thank you to putting out what you do, because it does make a difference out there.
Oh, thanks. That means a lot coming from you. Just so much there to unpack a bit. Talking about, for people to sort of listen or think about what they're listening to. music and stuff not really feeding your mind. It reminds me of another Jim Rohn quote when he was referring to television, and he would ask people, what did that television cost you? And a person would get back to him and say, $400. And he says, no, not to buy it, to watch it. What's it costing you to watch it? And they're like, to watch it? He says, I gather that thing's costing you at least $40,000 a year with the time you spend watching it.
Wow.
When you could be doing something much more productive in that time. So, and it's the same with podcasts. Like if you could be listening to a pod, they're great because you can learn stuff while you're working, but you can actually be, you're making so much more of that time. You're still earning your money, but you can, be listening time that you'd be sitting there listening to music, not really, learning anything. You can be bettering yourself.
Yeah. And
that doesn't mean that, listening to me is going to give you all the answers, like I said, because,
right.
I know nothing. Case in point, you talked about me, trying to urge you onto Instagram and stuff like that. And, you finally reluctantly got started on it and,
true.
You did it. And I think within a year, I think I was at the point, I think I was at 6,000 followers, and you within a year got to 6,000 and you passed me. And I think I messaged you, the student becomes the teacher. What the heck are you doing to grow so fast on Instagram, right?
I just asked everybody else what they're doing. so I was just
like, it's just awesome to see, right? And learning from each other. And that's what it's all about. It's just, what's that saying? Give a man a fish and feed him for a day, or teach a man a fish and feed him for a lifetime. Think about that legacy. Think about when you're not here anymore, the lives that you could impact and how that trickles down to somebody that, is working maybe a part-time job, barely making it by on minimum wage, to then starting their own business because you maybe motivated them. And now, fast forward years later, and now, they're able to put their kids through college. And now how's that trickling, down to their kids being able to go to college or whatever the case may be.
Amen.
That sort of thing. So it's just that I think that's what keeps me going, is just seeing that impact. Every little, like, people will send me a little message, here and there and stuff. And it's just like, they're like, yeah, I just wanted to let you know. And I always reply like you have no idea what that means to me.
Dude,
it may sound simple that you're just saying this little thing, but it means so much to me to know that that's what you think of the podcast that you.
Well, we're human. Like we appreciate that positive feedback loop, and we always wonder sometimes like if people are watching or people are listening or people are enjoying the videos or the podcast, right? Because like sometimes it's just, it's you and me here on this, but I don't know if somebody's still listening to the podcast or if they clicked off. But I know, same thing, dude. When people shoot me those DMs or those emails, saying thank you, like you changed my business, you changed my life, you changed my kids, or whatever. I totally take that serious, and I super appreciate that stuff because, I mean, I'm just honored to even be able to have a platform that we've built to be able to pour back into people, like you said, and I totally acknowledge that I'm sitting on the shoulders of other folks that have been here before and will probably be here after. And so, one thing, not to one up by any means, but you said such a good thought a second ago with that TV comment. I've never heard that one before, and that was really, really good. And a lot of people have heard this one, but you gotta make it personal to you. And people say like, people are the average of the five, top 5 books they read and the people they associate with, right? And okay, well, if I want to be, wealthier and increase my life and my income and my, have a deeper relationship with my wife, Liz, and be a better, son to my mom and just be a better citizen, be a better patriot, be a better person educated in civics and politics, right? Like, the opportunity for me to go hang out with a Ben Shapiro, a Grant Cardone, a Robert Kiyosaki, Dr. Oz, which I'm not saying he's a good health resource. I'm just, it's the only name I know in healthcare or whatever, or health related stuff. But like, you guys get the point. The reality is that I don't have those opportunities to go hang out with those kind of folks and that caliber of people, right? Not yet, probably not any in the meantime future, right? So anytime that I can listen to a Jocko, podcast, or an Andy or Sal or Scylla, and those guys run a $200 million company, like, hell yeah, I'm going to take that opportunity. And and it's like, wait a minute, it's free? Well, here's the deal. I always tell people it's free to consume. It's never free to produce. And so when folks, the easiest currency that costs nothing is to leave a 5-star review. That's huge. Whether you do that on my podcast or Julio's, like please do. We sincerely appreciate it, because it does trigger the algorithm gods, as everybody calls them, on the YouTubes and the interwebs, and it's just funny how it all comes down to ranking, But if there's anybody that has an opportunity to, support with a code, or, buy an affiliate link or a product for something you were already going to buy anyway, like that, it really does go a long way. Like just 10 or 20 bucks here and there to help feed the baby, I call it, and fund the hobby. So, well, I'll be honest with you, man. Like that's kind of all she wrote with things that I got on my mind right now that I want to ask you. Like I know they're topical, but these are like the fun ones. These are all questions, because I was joking with you. I'm like, the interviewer is now the interviewee, and now you're on the firing line. So this is
very strange.
I was gonna say you've interviewed 200 plus people or whatever, and and got to talk. I'm like, well, I want to hear you talk. I want to know your story, and I really appreciate it. So last thing I'll say, open mic. You got anything that you wanted to leave the Julio of 10 or 15 years ago, or maybe the guy just getting started in business? Any last things are on the top of your mind that you want to share while we got you?
I think it would just go back to having the right mindset. It's hard to sort of comprehend for somebody just starting out, and it sounds like kind of gibberish, but you really can sort of do anything you set your mind out to. Just like I said, I look back at all those entrepreneurial things that I tried to do in the past, and they all failed. And when I honestly look at myself, I was the reason why they failed, whether it was I was too shy or too lazy, or whatever it is. If you're honest with yourself, like, you don't have to tell the world, you don't have to but have a conversation with yourself. Are you cut out for this? Whatever the case may be. Lawn care looks easy and stuff like that, but there's a lot to it, right? Like with me, it was, hey, I gotta figure out if I'm going to be good in the rain and stuff like that, like if I can deal with that, and customer interactions. Have a conversation with yourself, but that mindset is almost more important than anything else. And you'll find that as you start to break those ceilings that you thought were impossible to start with, like maybe getting your first few customers, or getting to, have a good little income, you'll see that next plateau presents itself, and you start to see that as like, I could probably do that next. And as you get to that one, it opens up a whole new world where you're like, I could go to do this now. And so mindset is just, it's just massive.
That's huge.
And I would say one resource, I've talked a lot about Jim Rohn here, but one thing that I used to listen to, and I still do listen to it, is a YouTube video I found. I stumbled upon it on YouTube a few years ago. It's a Jim Rohn seminar. Just go into YouTube and type in Jim Rohn seminar. And the name of the video is Jim Rohn, Learn These Skills or Live a Mediocre Life. And it says full seminar from 1981. It's 2 hours long. Wow. I listened to that so much. I actually took that video and stripped the audio out so I could put it as an MP3. Sure. And I will listen to that on repeat. Like I've listened to that thousands of times. Wow. Every quote that I talked about today came from that video. It will change your life. Listening to that full 2 hour seminar. It's absolutely awesome. And you can get it free on somebody's YouTube channel right now.
Wow. Well, dude, I echo everything you just said, man. I think that's some really powerful stuff, because Keith Kalfas calls them like self-limiting beliefs, right? And just having a proper mindset. And that's what people listening to this are doing. So we're preaching to the choir, but keep engaging is, I guess, what you do from here, last thing I'll say is where can people find you? What I know you're on YouTube and Instagram. So just take a quick second, plug your socials and the podcast so everybody knows where to find you.
Yeah. So the podcast website is lawncarebusinesssuccess.com. Lawn Care Business Success is all one word. There you can find the home of the podcast, but the podcast is available anywhere. So if you've got an iPhone, the podcast app will find it there. It's on Google Play. It's on Stitcher Radio. It's on SoundCloud, on Spotify, everywhere you can listen to a podcast. You'll find all the episodes there, or the whole back catalog. YouTube, Lawn Care Business Success is the channel, and Instagram, Lawn Care Business Success. That's pretty much
nice.
Where you'll find me.
Love it, man. And the last thing I'll say, and this is kind of funny and this is kind of awkward, but it is Julio, not Julio, right? Just so everybody does know.
Yeah. Yeah. So
while we're clearing it all up,
I was born in Canada. So I was born in Canada, but my parents are originally from Portugal. So in the Portuguese language, the J is pronounced as a J. So it's Julio in the Spanish language, and it's as an H, as in Julio.
Yes.
So, but because I'm Portuguese, it's officially Julio. But people that call me Julio, I'm fine with that too. It's
okay.
never been an issue.
Well, it's funny. I was talking to somebody once, and you did a podcast with them, and they're like, "Dang it, dude! I called him Julio the whole hour and a half." I go, he didn't correct you? He goes, no. I go, oh, well, I know it's Julio. And he goes, whatever. I'm like, if it was a big deal, I'm like, Julio would have probably said something, but I'm sure he gets it so much. It's no big deal.
I learned in going through elementary school and high school, I would correct people, but correct the teachers, I would say, on the first day, like, of classes each year. And they would say, is it Julio? Is it Julio? And I was so shy and introverted. Everybody would turn around and look at me, and I was like, I don't care. Like, just move on to the next person. Name. I don't care what you call me, sort of thing. It's like, sort of thing, right?
Oh,
so,
my God.
Now it's just like, whatever. I don't care.
Right. Dude, that's funny right there. Well, I just wanted to, I don't know. I'm a nerd like that. I'm like, hey, just so everybody knows, it's Julio. Okay. So that way, when you guys see him at GIE running around with his camera and his GoPro, you guys can, know his correct name. You know what I mean? But, no, dude, I
actually,
go ahead.
A funny little quick story. Sorry, quick little story. When Jobber Software started sponsoring my podcast, we were doing this Jobber Minute segment, and the girl's name at the time is Murray, but I didn't know. It sounded like it was kind of French Canadian and stuff. So I was saying her name as Moye, and it's funny because she would record her part and say Julio. So when I finally met her in person, she finally kind of emailed me and said, "Oh, my name's actually Murray," and I said, "Oh, okay, well, since we're being honest, my name's actually Julio."
Oh my God!
So the first few ones that you hear, she's calling me Julio, and I'm calling her Moye, and then we were just laughing at GIE because she was like, "I thought you were doing it on purpose to get back at me for calling you Julio."
Oh my God, that's funny. Like, wait a minute, you guys are both from Canada. So you guys are both from Canada. Like, you should know the different dialects. You know what I mean? Like, no excuses for you. No, obviously, Maury's
it was so funny.
She's an amazing girl. She's no, I don't think she's with Jobber.
No, she's not there anymore.
She's an amazing girl. We can get her on the podcast just for old time's sake, because she's a crazy butt kicking girl for social media and just as a business lady in her own regard. But I'm sure one day she'll come back to the lawn care green industry or something like that. But well, no, dude, I super appreciate the time. An hour and a half again. It turns into a time warp when you're listening to these things. And I know guys like you and me, we could talk for hours. We'll if you're around and we get the time mid season, midsummer, we got to get an update from Cloverdale Mowing and Julio with everything you got going on. So if you're open to it and you want to come back maybe in the summer, we'll do another episode, man, and continue on the conversation.
Yeah, sounds good, man.
I love it. All right, cool. All right, guys. Well, hey,
awesome.
If you guys enjoyed everything, like I said, make sure you zip on over, check out Julio's podcast with Lawn Care Business Success. I know I listen to it, like I said, every Tuesday. There's a good old episode 89, just so you know, if you want to start with any episode, just having fun. But in all seriousness, if you guys can, leave some 5-star reviews, we both super appreciate that. That really does help us out. So if you guys do enjoy the show and consuming the content, we really do appreciate it. It means a lot. So, all right, guys, that's it from another episode of the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast. We definitely look forward to catching up with you guys on the next one. We'll see you guys.
Thanks for taking the time to listen to the Fullerton Unfiltered podcast with Brian Fullerton. We hope you enjoyed this production. If so, please consider leaving us a 5-star review for the show. While the techniques and ideas presented here are designed to help you grow a more successful and profitable business, no one can guarantee these results for you. We want to emphasize that entrepreneurship is not easy, and the ideas presented here are just the opinions of Brian Fullerton and his respective guests. No one can guarantee success for you. That being said, we hope the ideas presented here help you and motivate you to go on out there and crush it with your own business.
Fullerton Unfiltered podcast.
Thanks for listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode.